The old nun had spent most of her life in the quiet walls of the convent. She moved slowly, carefully, with the wisdom that came from years of living simply and serving others. Every morning, she walked the same path through the garden, her fingers lightly touching the flowers as if she were greeting old friends. She enjoyed the smell of the earth, the sunlight on her face, and the quiet sounds of birdsong. But there was one thing that gave her more joy than anything else: the piano. From the time she was very young, she had felt a deep connection to music. The piano had always been her companion, her comfort in lonely times, and her source of endless happiness. She remembered the first time she had touched the keys. Her small hands had trembled as she pressed them down, and the sound had made her heart leap with excitement. As she grew older, she practiced every day, learning more about melodies, harmonies, and the way music could speak without words. She had always dreamed of playing in front of others, of sharing the beauty she felt inside. But life had taken her in a different direction. She had chosen a life of devotion, of service, and of helping others. And still, the piano was always there. Inside the convent, the piano sat in a small music room. It was old and worn, but it still produced a beautiful sound when touched by her fingers. She would sit there for hours, letting her hands move across the keys, creating songs that seemed to come from deep within her soul. The other nuns often heard the music and would smile quietly as they passed by the room. Sometimes a visitor would come by, and she would play for them, but only for a few moments. She never expected applause or recognition. Playing was enough. Life in the convent was simple. Every day followed a pattern, a rhythm of prayer, work, and quiet moments. The nun helped in the kitchen, tended to the gardens, and taught younger novices the values of patience and kindness. She was respected and loved by all who knew her. But there was a longing inside her, a wish that one day she could play for more than just the walls of the convent. She imagined a room full of people, the soft murmur of anticipation, and the way the music could make hearts feel lighter. It was a dream she kept close to her heart. One morning, as she walked through the garden, she noticed the sunlight dancing on the leaves and thought of a new melody. It was a simple tune, gentle and soft, yet full of emotion. She hurried to the music room, eager to try it out. Her fingers moved with surprising speed and precision, as if they remembered every note she had ever learned. The sound filled the room, and for a moment, she closed her eyes and felt the world disappear. There was only her and the piano, and the music that flowed between them. But that day, something unusual happened. A visitor from the convent board arrived. They were in charge of rules and decisions, and they had a reputation for being strict. They entered the music room unexpectedly, interrupting her practice. The nun paused, uncertain of what to say. The visitor spoke gently but firmly, telling her that it was not appropriate for her to spend so much time on music. They reminded her that the convent was a place of work and prayer, not of performances or personal ambition. She felt a wave of disappointment but said nothing. She understood the rules, but her heart ached. Music was not just a hobby. It was a part of who she was. For days, she tried to follow the rules, focusing on her duties and keeping her music private. But the piano called to her every morning, whispering melodies only she could hear. She found small moments to play in secret when no one was around. She would close the door, sit at the old piano, and let her fingers dance across the keys. Each note was a small act of freedom, a quiet rebellion against the limitations placed on her. She remembered the joy of music, the way it could lift her spirit even in the hardest moments. The other nuns noticed her quiet determination. They saw how her eyes would light up when she played, and how the air seemed to shimmer with the music. Some of them whispered among themselves, wondering if there might be a way to let her share her gift without breaking the rules. They admired her patience, her dedication, and the way she never complained, even when she was denied what she loved most. As the days passed, the nun continued to practice in secret. She composed new pieces, blending the memories of her past with the feelings of the present. The music was her diary, her way of speaking when words were not enough. She would often sit for hours, lost in the sound, imagining the faces of people who might one day hear her play. In those moments, she felt a connection to the wider world, even though she remained within the convent walls. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with shades of orange and pink, she played a melody that she had been working on for weeks. It was a gentle tune, full of hope and longing. She could hear the notes echoing softly against the walls, and for the first time in many days, she felt a sense of peace. She knew that music could reach beyond the rules, beyond the walls, and touch hearts in ways nothing else could. She smiled quietly, feeling that even if the world could not hear her now, one day it might. Her life was not easy, but it was full of small joys and quiet triumphs. She found happiness in the simple routines, in the company of her fellow nuns, and in the music that was always with her. She learned to accept the limitations placed on her while still nurturing the dreams that lived inside her. The piano was more than an instrument. It was a friend, a teacher, and a companion. It reminded her that even in old age, there was beauty to create and share. That as the night grew darker and the convent settled into silence, the nun would often sit at the piano one last time before bed. Her fingers would move slowly, carefully, playing soft notes that seemed to float in the air like whispers of hope. She imagined the world beyond the convent, people listening, hearts touched by her music, and a sense of wonder in their eyes. It was a dream that she held close, a promise to herself that one day, she would play for more than just the walls of the convent. Even though she faced obstacles, she never gave up on her love for music. Each day, she found strength in the piano, courage in the melodies, and joy in the act of creating. She knew that life could be challenging, and rules could be strict, but the heart had its own voice, and hers spoke through music. In the quiet of the convent, she continued to practice, to dream, and to believe that one day, her music would reach the world and leave a mark that would be remembered for years to come. The nun tried to carry on with her daily life, focusing on her duties and quiet moments of prayer. But the memory of the visit from the convent board weighed heavily on her mind. She could not forget the disappointment she had felt, nor the way her heart had sunk when she was told that spending too much time at the piano was not appropriate. She loved the convent, she loved the people there, and she respected the rules. Yet, the music in her soul would not be silenced. For the first few days after the visit, she obeyed the instructions carefully. She spent her time tending the gardens, cleaning the rooms, and helping her fellow nuns in any way she could. Each task was performed with patience and devotion, but her mind was often elsewhere, replaying melodies she had imagined and compositions she had practiced in secret. She felt a longing so strong it made her hands itch to touch the piano. Her fellow nuns noticed a subtle change. She smiled less often, her movements were slower, and she seemed lost in thought. Some tried to speak to her about it, asking if everything was all right, but she would only nod and say she was fine. Inside, however, her heart was restless. Music had always been her companion, her refuge, and now she felt a part of herself was being held back. She began to think of ways she could still play without attracting attention, ways she could keep the music alive within her. One afternoon, while cleaning the music room, she lingered by the piano. She ran her fingers over the keys, careful not to press too hard, careful not to make a sound that might be heard by anyone walking by. The keys felt familiar, like old friends waiting to be spoken to. She closed her eyes and imagined the music flowing from her hands, filling the room, filling the hearts of anyone who could hear. The melodies were gentle, soft, yet full of emotion. Even in silence, the music lived in her mind. As days passed, she found small opportunities to play. Early in the morning, when the convent was quiet and most of the nuns were still asleep, she would slip into the music room. She kept the door slightly closed, just enough to muffle the sound. She played slowly at first, savoring each note, each chord, allowing herself to feel the joy that only music could bring. Sometimes, she would stop and listen to the faint echo of her own creation, smiling quietly at the beauty she could make with her own hands. Even though she was careful, the music could not stay hidden entirely. A young novice, who often rose early to help with chores, heard the soft melodies one morning. She stood outside the room, listening in awe, unsure if she should interrupt. When the nun noticed her, she smiled warmly and motioned for her to come in. The novice hesitated but then stepped inside. The nun played a few notes and then stopped, looking at the young girl with gentle eyes. "You have a gift," the nun said softly. "Music is a gift, and it is meant to be shared, even in small ways." The novice was amazed. She had never heard such beautiful music before. She could see the passion in the nun's eyes, the love for what she did. From that day on, the novice became her quiet companion during secret practice sessions. Together, they explored melodies, harmonies, and rhythms. The young girl learned to appreciate the depth of music, while the nun found joy in teaching and sharing, even in secrecy. Despite the small companionship, the nun could not help but feel the weight of the restriction. She longed to play freely, to let the world hear her music. She would sometimes sit by the window, looking out at the distant town beyond the convent walls, imagining a day when she could play for more than just the few who knew her secret. The thought made her heart ache, but it also strengthened her determination. She knew that one day, she would find a way to share her music, no matter the obstacles. In the evenings, after the convent had grown silent, she would sit by the piano again. The moonlight would fall across the keys, casting a gentle glow. She played slowly, letting each note linger in the air. Sometimes, she would close her eyes and let memories guide her fingers. The first time she touched the piano, the joy of discovering a new melody, the feelings of hope and longing that had always driven her. Music became her language, her way of expressing what words could not. She also began to write down her compositions in a small notebook. Each page contained the melodies that had lived in her mind for so long. She wrote carefully, knowing that these notes might one day reach a wider audience. The act of writing gave her a sense of purpose. Even if she could not perform publicly, she was creating something lasting, something that could survive beyond the walls of the convent. The nun faced moments of doubt, too. She wondered if she would ever be allowed to play openly, if anyone beyond the convent would ever hear her music. At times, she felt frustrated, questioning why such joy should be restricted. But she reminded herself that her life had always been about patience, about finding peace within limits, and about serving others. Music had not left her. It lived in her heart, and that was enough to keep her going. Occasionally, she would catch glimpses of the world outside the convent. Travelers would pass by the garden, children would play in the fields nearby, and merchants would bring news from the town. She would imagine them listening to her music, feeling the emotions she poured into each note. It was a small comfort, a vision that kept her spirit alive. She realized that music had a power beyond her own understanding, a way of touching hearts even from a distance. Over time, the nun's secret sessions became a part of her routine. She balanced her duties with her need to play, carefully choosing moments when she could practice without interruption. Each time she sat at the piano, she felt a renewal of energy, a connection to her younger self, and a reminder of why she had chosen this path in life. Music was not just a hobby. It was a lifeline, a source of strength, and a way to express the deepest parts of her soul. Word of her talent began to spread quietly within the convent. Some of the older nuns remembered hearing her play when she was younger and were amazed at how her skill had grown. Others admired her dedication, seeing how she balanced her secret passion with the responsibilities of daily life. While no one outside the convent knew of her music, within its walls, she had begun to inspire those around her. She taught them not just about notes and melodies, but about patience, resilience, and the quiet joy of following one's heart. As the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, the nun continued her secret practice. She explored new pieces, experimented with different styles, and found new ways to express herself through music. She discovered that even when blocked from performing publicly, creativity could not be contained. The piano became a mirror of her soul, reflecting her emotions, her dreams, and her hope for the future. There were moments of fear, too. She worried that someone might find out and reprimand her. She worried that her dreams might remain unfulfilled. But each time she played, she remembered the joy it brought her, and the way music could lift her spirit above any obstacle. It reminded her that life was not just about following rules, but also about honoring the gifts we are given and finding ways to let them shine. The bond between the nun and the young novice grew stronger. They shared quiet afternoons of music, exchanging ideas and learning from each other. The nun found joy in teaching, seeing the spark of passion in the novice's eyes. And the novice learned that music was more than sound. It was a language of the heart, a way to communicate feelings too deep for words. Together, they created a small world where music could live freely, even if the larger world remained out of reach. Despite the challenges, the nun's love for music never waned. Each day she grew more determined to find a way to share her gift, to let her melodies be heard beyond the convent walls. She knew that obstacles were part of life, but she also knew that the heart could find ways to overcome them. Music had taught her patience, resilience, and the importance of hope. She believed that one day, her dream of playing for a wider audience would come true. As the sun set each evening, she would sit at the piano one last time, letting her fingers glide over the keys. She played softly, imagining a world beyond the convent, imagining hearts touched by her music. Even if no one heard her now, she knew that the music lived on, both within her and in the hearts of those who had quietly listened. It was a promise to herself, a vow that she would not give up, and a reminder that even in the face of obstacles, beauty could still flourish. In these quiet moments, the nun felt a deep sense of purpose. She realized that the act of playing, even in secret, was a triumph in itself. She had found a way to nurture her passion without breaking the rules, to keep her dream alive even in difficult circumstances. The piano was more than an instrument. It was a lifeline, a source of comfort, and a testament to the strength of the human spirit. And so, she continued to play, day after day, letting her music flow, dreaming of the moment when the world would finally hear the melodies that had lived in her heart for so long. Even though she was careful, the nun's music could not remain hidden forever. One quiet morning, as she practiced a soft, new melody, the door creaked open slightly. She froze for a moment, her fingers suspended above the keys, unsure if she should continue. Then she noticed a young visitor, a musician from a nearby town, standing at the doorway. The young person's eyes widened in surprise and delight as they heard the gentle notes filling the room. The nun gave a small, polite smile and motioned for the visitor to come in. "I did not expect company," she said softly. "But music is meant to be shared, even in small ways." The visitor stepped inside cautiously, drawn by the sound. They were amazed at the skill and emotion conveyed in every note. It was not just the technical ability, but the feeling, the depth, and the love that seemed to flow through each movement of her fingers. The visitor could not help but whisper, "This is extraordinary." The nun continued to play, letting the music guide her. The room seemed to grow warmer, the air lighter. The visitor listened in awe, unable to stop themselves from tapping a foot to the rhythm. It was clear that this was not just practice. This was an expression of a lifetime of passion and dedication. Each note seemed to tell a story of longing, patience, and quiet triumph. When the song ended, the nun looked at the visitor with gentle eyes. "Music has always been my companion," she explained. "Even when I am blocked from sharing it, it finds a way to live in me. It gives me strength and joy, even in difficult times." The visitor nodded, deeply moved. They had heard many musicians before, but something about this performance felt different. It was real, heartfelt, and timeless. They felt privileged to have witnessed it. "You must share this with the world," they said softly. "People need to hear your music." The nun shook her head gently. "I cannot. The rules of the convent forbid public performances. But the music lives in my heart, and that is enough for now." Despite her words, something inside her stirred. Perhaps there was a way, a small chance, to share her gift without breaking the rules. The visitor's encouragement had planted a seed of hope, a spark that reminded her that her music could touch more than just herself. She began to think about possibilities, small steps that might lead to a bigger stage someday. Over the next few weeks, the nun and the visitor met in secret. They experimented with new melodies, improvised together, and shared ideas. The young musician taught her a few modern techniques, and in return, she shared the depth of her experience, the careful practice that came from decades of dedication. Their sessions were filled with laughter, concentration, and a growing sense of purpose. It was not only about music. It was about connection, about understanding, and about finding courage in a world that sometimes imposed limits as their bond grew. The nun became bolder in her practice. She no longer feared being overheard. Instead, she focused on perfecting her pieces, making sure that every note carried the emotion she intended. The visitor marveled at her dedication and skill. "I have never met anyone who plays with such soul," they said. "Your music has a power that can reach far beyond this room." Encouraged, the nun began to document her compositions. She wrote down each melody, each chord, and each harmony in careful detail. The notebook became a treasure trove of her creativity, a record of decades of learning, dreaming, and expressing herself through music. She imagined a day when someone could read the notes and play them exactly as she had, preserving the feeling and the heart behind every piece. Even as she nurtured this secret collaboration, life in the convent continued as usual. The other nuns remained largely unaware of her musical progress, though a few older sisters had noticed the glow of determination in her eyes. They respected her devotion and admired her patience, though they did not know the full extent of her practice. The nun was careful, balancing her secret sessions with the responsibilities of her daily life, ensuring that her passion did not disrupt the harmony of the convent. One afternoon, the visitor suggested an idea. "There is a local charity event in town," they said quietly. "It is not a performance for fame or profit, just a gathering to bring people together. Perhaps you could play there, in a way that honors your rules but also shares your gift." The nun hesitated, unsure if she was allowed to consider it, but the thought lingered in her mind. She imagined people listening, hearts touched by the music she had carried for so long. She felt a mixture of excitement and fear. The rules of the convent were clear, yet the desire to share her music burned brighter than ever. Over the next few days, she pondered the possibility. She thought of the joy music had brought her throughout her life, the comfort it had given her in lonely moments, and the way it could touch others. Perhaps there was a way to perform that did not violate the spirit of her vows or the rules of the convent. Perhaps she could play for the sake of love and connection, rather than recognition or ambition. Finally, she decided to take a careful step forward. She would play at the charity event, but in a discreet manner, ensuring that her actions were respectful of the convent and its traditions. The visitor helped her prepare, discussing the logistics, the pieces to perform, and the way to maintain the dignity and humility that were central to her life. As the day of the event approached, the nun felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. She had spent decades honing her skill, yet the thought of playing for an audience, even a small one, made her heart race. She practiced diligently, refining each melody, ensuring that every note carried the emotion she intended. Her hands, though aged and delicate, moved with precision and grace, reflecting a lifetime of experience. The morning of the event arrived, and she donned her simple habit, feeling a sense of calm resolve. She had spent years serving, learning, and creating quietly, and now she had an opportunity to share a part of herself with the world. The visitor accompanied her, offering reassurance and encouragement. "Your music is a gift," they said. "People will feel it, even if they do not understand the story behind it." When she arrived at the venue, she was struck by the faces of the audience, a mixture of curiosity, kindness, and expectation. She found her place at the piano, her heart beating steadily as she took a deep breath. The first note resonated through the hall, soft and clear. She closed her eyes and let the music flow naturally, allowing her emotions to guide her fingers. The melodies rose and fell, carrying the listeners along, painting pictures of hope, love, and resilience. The audience was silent, captivated by the depth and beauty of the performance. Each note seemed to reach into their hearts, stirring emotions that had been buried or forgotten. They listened with rapt attention, moved by the power of a lifetime of dedication expressed in a single moment. The nun felt a quiet joy, knowing that the music had found its way beyond her own experience, touching the lives of others. When the final note faded, there was a moment of silence, as if the world itself had paused to absorb the beauty of what had been shared. Then, slowly, the audience erupted in applause. It was not loud or boisterous, but warm, heartfelt, and sincere. Tears glistened in the eyes of some listeners, while others smiled with quiet wonder. The nun opened her eyes and met the gaze of the visitor, who nodded with pride and admiration. In that moment, she understood the true power of music. It was not about rules, recognition, or fame. It was about connection, about touching hearts, about sharing a piece of one's soul with the world. She had been blocked from playing for many years, but she had never been silenced. The music had found its way, and in doing so, it had revealed the strength, courage, and beauty that had lived within her all along. After the performance, people approached her, thanking her for the music, sharing how it had moved them, and expressing their admiration. She listened with humility, grateful for the chance to give something meaningful, yet she remained grounded in the values she had always cherished. The experience was transformative, not only for the audience but for herself. She realized that even after decades of quiet, patient life, her passion and dedication could still shine, inspiring others and bringing joy in ways she had never imagined. As she returned to the convent, the nun felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had faced obstacles, been told no, and yet she had found a way to honor her gift and share it with the world. She knew that there would be challenges ahead, but the memory of that day, the feeling of music touching hearts beyond the convent walls, would remain with her forever. It was a triumph of patience, courage, and the enduring power of the human spirit. The nun spent the following days preparing for the event with care. Every morning, she rose early to practice, feeling both excitement and nervousness in equal measure. Her hands had grown older and slower over the years, but her mind and heart were sharper than ever. Each note she played was deliberate, each melody infused with the emotion she had carried for decades. The small notebook she had been keeping of her compositions became her guide, and she made careful notes on every piece she intended to perform. The visitor from the town continued to help, offering gentle guidance and encouragement. They reminded her that it was not about perfection but about the feeling she shared through music. Together, they refined the pieces, discussing nuances and small details, the way a painter might adjust colors on a canvas. The nun absorbed every suggestion, her focus and dedication unwavering. She wanted the performance to be a gift, a moment of connection, not just an act of personal satisfaction. As the day approached, nerves began to creep in. She spent long hours alone in her room, reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She remembered the early days at the convent, the quiet hours spent playing the piano in secret, the doubt and fear she had felt when told she could not share her music publicly. Yet she also remembered the small victories, the joy in the eyes of the young novice who had listened, the warmth of the visitor's encouragement. All of this had led her to this one opportunity, and she knew she must face it with courage and grace. The morning of the event was calm but filled with anticipation. The sun rose slowly, casting a warm glow over the town and the surrounding countryside. The nun dressed carefully in her habit, feeling a sense of calm determination. She packed her notebook, made sure the piano at the venue was ready, and walked with measured steps toward the hall. The visitor accompanied her, offering quiet words of reassurance. "You are ready," they said. "Your music will speak for itself." When she arrived at the venue, she was struck by the small crowd gathered there. People from the town, young and old, had come together for the charity event. The atmosphere was filled with quiet expectation, curiosity, and goodwill. After the performance, members of the audience approached her, expressing their gratitude and admiration. They spoke of how deeply moved they were, how the music had touched emotions they had not felt in years, and how it had reminded them of beauty, hope, and resilience. The nun listened with humility, her heart swelling with quiet pride and satisfaction. She had never sought fame or recognition, Yet she understood the power of sharing something meaningful with others. The visitor beamed with pride, quietly praising her skill and courage. "You have given them more than music," they said. "You have given them a glimpse of the heart and soul behind it. They will not forget this." The nun nodded, feeling a deep sense of contentment. She knew that the performance was more than a personal triumph. It was a reminder of the human capacity to create, inspire, and connect through passion and dedication. Returning to the convent later that evening, the nun felt a sense of calm and fulfillment. She reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The years of quiet practice, the moments of doubt and secrecy, the encouragement of the visitor, and the small bond with the young novice who had first listened to her music. Each step had been necessary, each challenge had shaped her, and each note had carried her closer to this triumph. She resumed her daily life at the convent with renewed energy and purpose. The music continued to flow through her, not just in private practice, but as a source of inspiration and joy in her interactions with others. She shared small melodies with the other nuns, who listened with appreciation and admiration, recognizing the depth of her talent and dedication. The atmosphere in the convent seemed lighter, infused with the warmth of music and the knowledge that passion and perseverance could create extraordinary moments. Even after the event, the nun continued to compose new pieces, exploring melodies that expressed the fullness of her experiences, emotions, and dreams. She documented each one carefully, knowing that they could one day reach an even wider audience. The joy of creating, the act of sharing, and the power of music to touch hearts became central to her life. She had discovered that even in old age, with challenges and restrictions, it was possible to find ways to express oneself and leave a mark on the world. The experience also taught her the value of courage and careful risk-taking. She realized that following one's heart, even within the constraints of rules and expectations, could lead to moments of unexpected joy and fulfillment. Her secret practices, once hidden from the world, had grown into a performance that touched many lives. The journey had been long and uncertain, but it had revealed the power of persistence, patience, and hope. As she played quietly in her room that evening, the nun reflected on the journey ahead. She knew that more opportunities could come, that her music might reach even more people, and that her compositions could continue to inspire others. The key, she understood, was to remain true to herself, to nurture her passion, and to approach each moment with humility, patience, and love. The audience at the event had received her music with open hearts, but more importantly, she had learned to receive herself with acceptance and confidence. She had discovered that age, rules, and obstacles could not diminish the joy of creating and sharing something beautiful. The music had found a way to flow, despite barriers, and it had touched lives in ways she had never imagined. In the quiet of the convent, she would often sit by the piano, her fingers gliding over the keys as she reflected on the experience. She knew that the journey was far from over, that there were more pieces to compose, more moments to share, and more hearts to touch. But she also knew that she had achieved something remarkable. She had taken a dream, nurtured it in secret, and shared it with the world, bringing light and beauty to those who listened. The nun's story spread quietly through the town, though she never sought attention or praise. People spoke of the woman who had dedicated her life to service and faith, yet who could play the piano with a skill and emotion that moved listeners deeply. Her music became a source of inspiration, a reminder that creativity, passion, and perseverance could overcome challenges, and that the human spirit could shine brightly, even in the most unexpected circumstances. Through it all, she remained humble and focused on the true purpose of her gift, to bring joy, comfort, and connection through music. Each note she played was a testament to the years of dedication, patience, and love she had invested in her craft. She had discovered that the heart, when guided by passion and courage, could overcome barriers and reach others in profound ways. The nun continued to live her life with quiet joy and fulfillment, carrying the memory of the performance with her as a source of inspiration. She knew that music had the power to transform, to heal, and to connect, and she dedicated herself to sharing that gift in ways that honored both her faith and her passion. In doing so, She created a lasting legacy, a story of hope, courage, and the enduring power of the human spirit. After the performance at the charity event, the nun returned to the convent with a quiet sense of accomplishment that settled deep within her. She had shared a part of her soul through music, and in doing so, had touched the hearts of many. The applause, the smiles, the tears of the audience. These were not memories of pride, but of connection and human warmth. She knew that her life had changed in a subtle but profound way. Her music was no longer confined to the walls of the convent. It had begun to live beyond them. In the following days, letters and messages of appreciation arrived from people who had attended the event. Some wrote simply to thank her for the music, describing how it had made them feel lighter, more hopeful, or more peaceful. Others recounted stories of how her performance had reminded them of loved ones, or stirred emotions they had long forgotten. Though she never sought attention, she cherished these words deeply, knowing that her music had reached beyond her own small world. Within the convent, her life continued in the same rhythm as before. She tended to the gardens, helped in the kitchen, and guided the younger novices in their studies and duties. But now, there was a new light in her eyes, a quiet confidence and contentment. The other nuns noticed this change and wondered at the serenity and joy that seemed to radiate from her. She did not speak much of the performance, for humility was a part of her nature, but her music continued to fill the halls in small ways, lifting spirits and inspiring those who heard it. The young novice who had first heard her secret practice grew closer to her, learning more about music, life, and the importance of following one's heart. Together, they would spend quiet afternoons at the piano, exploring new pieces and discussing the emotions behind them. The nun taught not only about technique but about patience, dedication, and the joy that comes from creating something meaningful. In the young novice, she saw a reflection of herself when she had been just learning, just discovering the magic of the piano. Meanwhile, the nun's compositions began to circulate quietly among local musicians and friends of the visitor who had encouraged her. They were played in small gatherings, for children in schools, and at local community events. Though the nun never sought recognition, she learned of the impact her music had through letters and kind words from those who had heard it. The realization that her gift could inspire, heal, and bring joy to others filled her with quiet pride and deep gratitude. Her experiences at the charity event gave her courage to explore further opportunities. Carefully, and always with respect for the rules of the convent, she began to consider performing again at small community gatherings. Each time, she approached it not as a performance for fame or attention, but as a chance to bring beauty and comfort into the lives of others. Her music became a bridge between the quiet life of the convent and the wider world, a connection that nurtured both her spirit and the hearts of those who listened. The nun also took time to reflect on her own journey. She thought about the years of secret practice, the obstacles she had faced, and the doubts that sometimes clouded her mind. She realized that each challenge had strengthened her, teaching patience, resilience, and the importance of hope. Music had been her companion through every stage of her life, giving her strength when she felt weak and joy when she felt weary. Now, she understood that the power of persistence and dedication could create moments that touched lives far beyond her own. Occasionally, visitors came to the convent specifically to hear her play. They would listen quietly, respecting the humble atmosphere of the place, and leave with hearts touched by her music. Some would write letters, some would bring small gifts of appreciation, but most simply left with gratitude. The nun welcomed each visitor with warmth and humility, grateful for the opportunity to share her gift. She understood that music was not a tool for fame, but a language of the heart, capable of bringing people together and lifting spirits. Over time, the nun's story began to inspire others in subtle ways. People spoke of the woman who had dedicated her life to service and faith, yet could play the piano with a skill and emotion that moved listeners deeply. Her story reminded others that it is never too late to follow one's passion, that age and obstacles do not define one's potential, and that perseverance and love for what one does can create profound moments of beauty. Her life became an example of how quiet dedication, humility, and courage could leave a lasting impact. One evening, as the sun set and the convent grew silent, The nun sat by the piano and reflected on the journey she had undertaken. Her fingers glided across the keys, producing melodies that were gentle, warm, and full of life. She thought of the young novice, the visitor, the audience at the charity event, and the countless people who had been touched by her music. Each note carried not just sound, but a story of hope, patience, and love. In that quiet moment, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment and peace. The nun realized that her music had become more than a personal joy. It had become a gift to the world. She had faced challenges, been told no, and encountered obstacles. Yet she had found ways to share her gift without compromising her values or humility. The music that had once been secret and private had grown into a force of connection, a way to reach beyond the walls of the convent and touch hearts with honesty and beauty. She understood now that every struggle, every moment of doubt, and every note played in secret had been preparing her for this purpose. As the years passed, she continued to play, teach, and inspire. She documented her compositions carefully, leaving behind a legacy that could be shared and remembered. Young musicians learned from her methods. Novices in the convent found inspiration in her dedication, and the community appreciated the quiet but profound impact of her music. Even though she lived simply, her influence was far-reaching, demonstrating the power of passion, patience, and humility. The nun's life became a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. She had discovered that age, limitations, and rules do not have to prevent one from creating and sharing beauty. By remaining true to herself, nurturing her passion, and carefully choosing how to express it, she had achieved something extraordinary. Her music continued to flow, touching hearts and inspiring others, long after the initial performance had ended. In her quiet moments, she would often reflect on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the times she had practiced in secret, the moments of doubt and fear, and the encouragement she had received from the visitor and the young novice. She realized that all these experiences were part of a larger story, a story of patience, courage, and love. Her music had not only enriched her life, but it had also enriched the lives of those who heard it, leaving a lasting impression that would endure for years to come. Even in old age, she continued to find joy in the piano. Each session was a reminder of the beauty and power of music, the importance of perseverance, and the joy of sharing one's gifts with others. She understood that true fulfillment comes not from recognition or applause, but from the act of creating, connecting, and touching lives in meaningful ways. Her life had become a symphony of patience, love, and dedication, a melody that resonated far beyond the quiet walls of the convent. The nun had started her journey with a simple love for the piano, a desire to play and express herself. Along the way, she encountered obstacles and doubt, yet she never gave up. She found ways to practice in secret, to teach and inspire, and finally to perform in a way that touched the hearts of many. Through it all, she remained humble, dedicated, and kind, demonstrating the true power of passion and perseverance. In the end, her story was not just about music. It was about hope, resilience, and the courage to follow one's heart, even when the path is uncertain. It was about the quiet victories that come from dedication and patience. It was about the connections that can be made when one shares their true gift with the world. And it was about the joy and fulfillment that comes from knowing that a life well lived, dedicated to purpose and passion, can leave a lasting mark on the hearts of many. The nun continued to play for the rest of her days, her music carrying her spirit forward and touching everyone who had the chance to hear it. She had turned obstacles into opportunities, silence into song, and her life into a living testament of hope and inspiration. And through every note she played, she reminded the world that it is never too late to follow one's dreams, to share one's gift, and to create beauty that endures.